So welcome back to Tattoo Darlings in one of Hannah Lynn's lovely books, and we're back to this. So we're going to carry on with some pencils now, and I have a small selection of pencils here. It's not a huge amount. The one thing I have done is made sure that they're all really sharp, and I would recommend a harder core pencil rather than a soft core because we want some really defined lines, because we're going to use our pencils to put in some shadows and some texture, so having pointy points is super important. I have Polychromos pencils here. Any other harder pencil would do. Crayolas are great, and again, just because of the type of paper, they just seem to behave better on Create Space paper than the softer pencils as well. So up here, if we take a look, I'm going to start with the hair because it is the biggest thing. The hair and the skin are the biggest areas. So what I want to do here is I have the cold grey, and I have cold grey 5, and I also have black as well. If you don't want to use black, Payne's grey is really good as well. I like that as a sort of backup option. And we're going to start with this big sort of sweeping section of hair at the front where I kind of have put the highlight in already. And all I'm going to do is start with my lighter pencil, which is the cold grey 5, and I'm just going to work a section at a time. And what I want to do is I want to darken down these areas where the hair gathers together, and then where it's spread out, where this sheen is, we want that lighter. And in order to do that, and this is a technique you'll have seen used elsewhere if you have ever watched any hair tutorial videos in terms of colouring. So we start in at the gathered area and we're just literally putting flicky motions, and this is why you need a sharp pencil. And we just want to start to darken down like this. And it is very subtle, but that is what we're looking for. So we have to look at each section individually and decide what we're doing with it. And they don't all have to be absolutely uniform because light hits hair in funny ways. Hair's really complicated. So you have to kind of take it on a section by section basis. So this part looks as if it's tucked in, so that's going to be a lot darker, so I'm going to kind of like fill that in. Now once we've done these sections, we're going to go back over with our black and darken down the dark parts even more. So it's really important that we think about that as we go along, knowing that you have a darker colour to work with. And we're just following the line of the hair, you know, the way the hair has been gathered up. I imagine that this would be quite dark in here because this looks like a little rogue section up here. And you will have to do a fair amount of pencil sharpening in this in order to keep that nice flicky line. And you're just giving that texture of the hair, you know, of the strands. And you can spend as much time in this as you want. So there you are, that one section alone already looks a bit more three-dimensional. So if we switch over to our black pencil now, you're going to want this in the darkest and tightest parts. So for example, in this corner here, this small section here is clearly tucked in behind this larger part. So we want that to be quite dark in there. Now when you're flicking your lines out here, you don't want to bring them as far out as the grey that you've just used, because you want that sort of graduation of the the colour difference, so slightly shorter strokes. And you can keep going back over and back over until you're happy with what you've got. Now I'm just making sure that when I'm getting into these, what I call the corners, when you're getting into the tight areas, that I'm making sure those are really dark. Because there won't be a lot of light hitting those particular sections that are kind of starting to tuck themselves in. Now if you want either really dark or less shiny looking hair, you can bring these grey areas much closer together and just have more of a band in the middle. I want to get as much contrast and interest in this as possible because we are working in grey. I do feel though that this section is slightly too pale, so I'm going to go back to my grey and I'm just going to bring them out a little bit further, you know, so that they meet in the middle a little bit more. And this is a really easy technique, but it's really, really effective. So if I just zoom out now and show you the picture, look at the difference that makes, you know, look how three-dimensional that is, and you can see that the hair is actually coming out forwards from her head as it's been curved round. So this is a really nice technique and I love it, and it's really fun to do as well because obviously you get to do the flicky thing. I really like the flicky thing. I'm going to carry on and do these other two sections exactly the same way, and I'll catch up with you once I have those completed. Alright, there we go. So you can see the difference. That is literally two coloured pencils, and one's grey and one's black, and look how much of a difference that can make from just your flat marker. Having the marker there as a base though is really helpful because obviously it makes things a lot quicker for you as well, and that's why I really enjoy using the marker pencil combo. So I'm going to talk about this section of hair here next, and it's because it's going to be quite similar to what's going on up here. This hair is coming out in a wave over her shoulder, so there's going to be some sort of highlight around this region here where the hair bumps up before it starts to curl back in. And I didn't want it as pale as up here. As I say, I'm kind of like in my head, the light source is coming from somewhere around here at her, and this is behind her head, so it will still catch the light, but perhaps not quite as much as her front area here. So it's exactly the same technique. I'm not doing anything different. We're just working in a slightly darker area. You still will get that contrast though because the pencils that you're using are much darker than the marker that we've got down. We've got a couple of little strands here, and it's kind of up to you what you want to do with them. I'm just going to pop in some grey flicky lines, and again I'm just following the line of the hair, you know, the curvature of, or the swoosh of the hair. I'm not going to put any grey in there, any black in there, because I think that these strands are coming out in front of what's there. So again, I'm not going to be particularly precious about this because there is so much going on with this hair. There's tons of it. Tons of it. My hairdresser says that to me all the time. You've got so much hair. I'm like, yes, I know. And there's this little strand here as well. This is kind of like what we would call a wee wispy bit that's just kind of poking out there all on its own nail. And then we've got a couple here as well. So I'll just use the grey for these. I might put a little bit of black in at the root there on that one. I know I have plenty of experienced colourists that watch, so you guys will know that this kind of technique will work. It doesn't matter what colour of hair that you are choosing to do, you know, as long as you've got a slightly darker shade and then a very dark shade, you can kind of go to town with stuff like this. For new colourists, try this out with different types of browns and blondes and redheads and everything in between, rainbow hair if that's what you like. It is a great technique and it's really easy, and a lot of colourists will use this when they're actually colouring in hair. Okay, so let's have a think about this section here now. So I'm not really thinking about the swirly ends for now. I just want to focus on getting this highlight in here. And in behind here is going to be really dark because it's coming out from behind her neck. So when we're putting in our grey, we want to bring the grey quite far out because we want to be able to put quite a lot of black in at this neckline. So just taking that into account, I want to start, this is kind of awkward, I'm going to turn this slightly, wait. There we go, so that you can still see what I'm doing. And basically, I think I'll start from this section here, and I'll just start putting my flicky lines in. And these are quite long strands, so I don't want to be too shy, but I want the highlight to sit where it starts to curve round. So I'm going to be bringing my grey pencil out to roughly here, all the way across, like this. This section's kind of tucked in behind, so we'll bring that all the way in there. So you can see I'm creating almost like an imaginary line here. If it's too harsh or it's not far enough out, you can always bring it further out, and that is one of the really nice things about using pencil. And these sections here are going to be quite dark, so we'll just sort of colour them in. We'll colour them in old school style. Okay, so we're thinking about the hair curving here as well. And you can see that there's a strand that comes out, so that's a really good place to start your lines from the other side. Now you don't want this to be a perfectly scientific straight line, because the hair there's obviously a lot of movement in it, so it doesn't have to be really precise. No one's going to kick your ass if it's not absolutely perfect. So just trying to follow these lines of the curvature of the hair as much as possible. It's not always the easiest thing to do, to be fair. Now again, just trying to kind of follow this up here. You know, keep that rough line in the same place. And colour that bit in there as well. This is going to be quite dark in here. Okay, so there's your foundation now with your pale stripe in the middle, and the black is just, excuse me, the black is really just going to make this pop out now. So I'll be a bit more methodical, I'll work my way up each side this time. Just making sure that when I'm coming to the gathered bits of hair that I'm making that nice and dark down in there. I'm using quite a firm pressure when I'm doing these flicks as well, and it's just so that I can get some of these quite defined strands of hair, if you like. Now when I'm working my way down here, I'm just looking to see where I've stopped with the grey and just trying to stop a little bit shorter with the black. This bit's kind of tucked in behind, so that's why I'm putting some black in on the left hand side. Now as I said, because this is in behind, we want to keep this section quite dark in here. Even if if you think the hair's coming out, it's still going to be a little bit darker in at the nape of your neck. Generally speaking, people's natural hair colour does tend to be darker in there anyway. So that's just something to sort of bear in mind. It's not a necessity, but it's just one of those things that are quite good to know. So these are all tucked in behind, so I'm going to make these really dark, and I'm not putting my flicky motions in, I'm just going to colour that in. Give that idea that it is tucked, you know, like way behind. Okay, let's move down here now. So I'm imagining these sections that are curved, that's where the light's going to hit those, but this is a bit more complicated because we've got this part that's kind of in behind, but it's not. So I think what I'll do is I will have maybe a little bit of a highlight just on that curvature there, And we'll make sure that these sections, because again they're going in behind, I'll make sure it's really dark down here. And then I'll just sort of keep adding in. Okay, that should do quite nicely, I think. Okay, so I'm just going to do the same for all of these sections now as well, picking out where the curve is, and at the apex of that curve I will have some sort of highlight there. That's where it's going to be lightest. Okay, so that's that section finished. So you can see that there is still a highlight, but it's just not quite as obvious as we've done up here. Now this section on this side is a bit of a free-for-all because the hair's going in loads of different directions. So I'm going to have a little bit of a highlight roughly around here, but other than that I'm just going to go strand by strand and make sure that I'm alternating just to give that bit of variation and some sort of body to the hair. So I'm just going to speed colour this part as well because you've kind of seen what I'm doing now. Alright, so now that we've done a number on the hair with the pencil, I'm going to move on to our skin tone now, and I err on the side of delicate, so you may want to take this a step further if you haven't decided to do so already. I'm just sticking with this Cold Grey 4, and basically we just want to start adding in some contours to our face. I like to work from the top down, so starting up in this corner, our hair's sweeping over, so this is going to be darker in here. Now really light hand, and if you pay attention to how far up the pencil my fingers are, it's really far up. And what we want to do is we just want to start popping in this kind of darker area. And normally this area here would be highlighted where the brow bone comes out, but because of the hair, that's not going to be the case. So we'll just want to keep a light hand there. And just gently, little circular motions. Now this is where I really like the texture of the paper. Some people don't, and if you are a person that doesn't like texture, then you're going to struggle with this paper. You can try and burnish this out if you want, but I wouldn't advise it personally. So we're just going to build up very gradual layers here. We want this effect to be subtle, and that's exactly what we're going to go for. So if there's some sort of light source, most of this side of our face is going to be highlighted and this side is going to be in shadow. And you can tell by the way the hair's coming across that it is more likely to be shadow on this side of the face, but we don't want her to look lopsided as well, so we kind of have to take that into consideration. So in here at the eyelids as well, I'm just going to darken that down a little bit because that is going to be naturally in the crease, as it were. And you can bring a little bit of this up above the line of that. And we want this to be quite dark in here because this is all hiding. And we can start to do the same down this side of our face as well. Now you can build these layers up really gradually if you just keep a really light hand. So you can barely see that on the paper, but you know that it's there because I'm doing this. And what we want to do is we want to bring in a little bit of a cheekbone. So if you can draw an imaginary an imaginary line from the corner of the mouth up. That's roughly where you want that contour to be in. So if you just keep to these really light motions, you can bring this down, and you want it to be kind of like a triangle shape, so you want it thicker on the outside here, and this just generally head in the direction of the mouth. And we can really start to darken down this corner now. Like this. So you can see already she's starting to get a little bit of shape to her face, which is what we want. We can just bring this down and sort of taper it into the chin line. Now we want a wee bit of shadow on this side, but not much. That's just to help show the curvature of her face. And again, you can bring this down a little bit around here as well. And then again, drawing that imaginary line. Bring it up and join it up here. And just kind of blend that out into nothing. Now it's up to you how dark you want this and how much you want it to stand out. See, I'm going for quite a subtle effect, so I'm not going to be going over it hugely. There we go, she's got some cheekbones, has our gal. The other area where you're going to find a bit of contour is under this bottom lip. So add a little bit in there. I like to bring it to kind of like a point almost, like a little triangle shape. And we want to give her some sort of nose, because traditionally Hannah Lynn just has this little line. So a little bit of a shadow under the nose, you don't want too much, and I kind of go in a semicircle to give the, you know, just the impression that she has a nose there. If you bring this too far down, you end up with a moustache, and that's what we don't want. But you could actually shade in any type of nose that you wanted. You know, you could get quite creative with that, and that would be kind of cool. And then the other thing I like to do as well is I like to bring this shading down from the eyebrows past the corner of the eye, and this is to start giving her like a nose shape. You know, so that you're actually aware that she has a nose of some description. And it can just be like a little semicircular line like this. You know, it's just like a suggestion. It's not actually, oh look, there's a nose here. And then I kind of bring this up a little bit as well, just up towards that brow bone as well. And then we can put in some semicircular lines here for nostrils. Now it's up to you what you do with that and how far you want to take it. As I say, there's no real kind of, it's about preference I suppose, and how much you actually want to augment the picture that's there. And I like to bring a little bit up under the eyes too. But as I say, that is just preference. There we go, and bring this down here a wee bit. There we go, so she's got a little bit more shape to her. Now down under the neck here, this is a different story, because you do want this to be a little bit darker. So like we did over here, we're going to be using much heavier shading under our chin here. But again, it's about building it up in layers, especially with this Create Space paper. There's no point in trying to rush this process at all. So bearing in mind that we think the light's more or less straight on as well, you can bring a bit of shadow around the side here to denote the curvature of the neck. The same down this side as well. And then we can start going back over just under this chin area, and keep your shading quite tight in towards that chin line. Makes her pop out a little bit more. I'm going to go back up here and really darken this down at this side. Maybe make this side a little bit darker too. Now this is one of these ones that if you take a step back and have a squint at your picture every now and then, you can start to build these layers up and decide whether something's maybe a bit too subtle. So I'm going to bring the shading down just underneath that fringe area because I do feel like it's sitting out from her head quite a lot, so there's going to be a little bit of a shadow cast under here and I want that to be quite obvious. Let me bring this round here. There we go, so you can see it's very gentle but it's there, and that is exactly what we want. So I imagine there'll be a fair bit of shading here as well because the way of her hair's curling round. So again, just the same thing, I'm just going to bring a little bit of shadow down here on this shoulder. Bring it down as far as I like, I suppose. And on her arms here as well, I have a little bit under where her top's sitting. And then behind all this hair, obviously there's going to be a fair bit there. And then down this side of her arm again, we're going for a curvature here, so it's going to be darkest where it's curving round towards her back, and then you can lighten that up like that. And we'll do the same on the other side as well. We don't have as much hair to contend with here, which is good. I'm pressing a little bit harder here as well. Just follow the line of her shirt round, like this. Keep it quite subtle. I'm going to put a little bit of shading in here as well. There we go. Normally I would bring some shading down here for her collarbones, but because we have this lettering there, I just want to leave that as it is. The next thing I want to do is just hop down to these eyeball sockets, the sockets on the skull. And I just want to continue these flicky lines a little bit more, so I'm in with my black pencil here. And just make this look a bit more hollow, you know, give it a bit more depth to it. So that looks better already, you know, the sockets look deeper. And see, all I'm doing is extending Hannah's lines here. I'm not actually doing anything particularly fancy. Round the edges here, round the sides, I'm bringing those dark lines a lot, you know, I'm bringing them together if you like. I'll just do the name for the same for the nose hole, the nose cavity. Nose hole, goodness me. There we are, I'm a little bit happier with that. So we have her hands now as well, and hands can be quite tricky, but again they're quite simple shapes here and we're not going to worry too much. So you can just see the tips of her next finger in. So I'm going to make them solid dark with my cold grey 4. And then again we want to think about the curvature of the hand here. So there's likely to be light here. So with the rest of these we want to put some shading down on the bottom part, which would be the underside of these fingers. And again, you just keep it simple, it doesn't have to be complicated, it's still going to look good. All you're trying to do is just add a bit of dimension. You're not going crazy here trying to make it look really lifelike, because naturally these images are not lifelike. They're very cartoony, and it's kind of nice to keep that feel. So there we go. Now I do imagine there would be a little bit of shading under here where the ashes or whatever it is are sort of falling down over her hand. I imagine that this would be a little bit more shaded. So So something like that, that's going to look okay. Just enough so that you can see it. And it is a lot more subtle in the camera as well. I do want to say that as well, than if you're looking at it with the naked eyeball, as I like to say. But you can see the difference in the two hands. It is so delicate, but it makes all the difference. And that's really kind of what I was aiming for. Less is more sometimes. Everything doesn't have to be in your face really, you know, really detailed and really bright and blah blah. It doesn't need it sometimes. This is one of those times. So, just doing the same on this side as I did on the other side, and I'm just following the line work round, keeping a light hand and making sure that there's no harsh lines. Right, so we'll go back up to her face, and first of all, working with the green, I have pine green. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put in some detail in her eyes. So naturally we tend to have like an outer ring, and I'm sure there is a proper anatomical name for it. I do not know what it is. I probably should. And I'm just going to use Pip's having a grump. I'm just going to use my pine green pencil to put this in around the edge. Now I'm going to do one eye at a time here so that you can see how much of a difference it actually makes. And you can see already, just from that tiny bit that I've done, that it does make a difference. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put the flecks in. So basically we want them to radiate like spokes on a wheel. That's the idea. But we want them to go from the outside in. So we're going to use our flicky motion again. And we're just going to pop in some of these lines like this, and then with a slightly lighter hand we're going to put smaller ones in. We want these to go most of the way around. Now you can vary these line widths, some long, some short, line widths, line lengths, lengths, and you can just build that up very gradually. And you can even bring that outer ring that we did to start with, you can start to blend that in towards the centre a little bit more as well. It depends how dark you want the eyes to look. There we go. So there's quite a marked difference between those two, and I haven't really done much, let's be realistic. Let's not beat about the bush. And this is what I keep saying, like, things don't have to be complicated. They do not have to be complicated. Okay, so do the same with the other eye now so that we can get them kind of matching. So start with that outer ring. Just a little bit either side. That's what we want. And then you can start with your flicks. Just make sure you're angling them in a circle. As I say, think about spokes on a bike wheel. I always think that's quite a good way to, quite a good analogy, a good way to think about it. And you can just add these in. Darken it down as much as you like. Obviously it's a good idea to test your pencil over the top of your marker before you start colouring in your colouring book, and I did that beforehand so that you guys wouldn't have to endure that. There we go, that's looking quite good. The one thing I don't like is that there's too much white in the eye, so I have got a black, it's actually a brush pen I'm using, it's a Pentel brush pen, but you can use even just a fine liner, and all I want to do is bring the pupil out and over a bit, so that looks more like a highlight rather than the bulk of her pupil. So you can see the difference between the two. I just think that there's a wee bit too much white going on there for my liking, but again, you can leave that if it's not something that's bothering you or you don't think it needs changed, then you don't have to change it. So there we go, that looks much better, if you ask me anyway. The next colour I've got is dark red, and all I want to do is, and I'm going with the side of my pencil here, and just above where we put that nice sort of cheekbone contour in, I'm just going to give her a little bit of blush. And I'm just like ever so gently, because you don't want her to look like a painted doll. Well, maybe you do, I don't, I'm not that way inclined. But I'm just letting that mix in with the grey a little bit. See, it's more the suggestion than actually, like, the colour actually being there. And you only need a tiny little bit just to bring out, you know, give her a bit of colour in her cheeks, make her look a little bit more alive. As some people would put a little bit on the nose as well. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of it. And again, just do the same thing, just build up the layers until you feel as if you've got enough colour. See, I just wanted a teeny weeny wee hint because I just think it helps to lift her face a wee bit considering it is grey. But you can see how nice that pale grey that we used as the base with the marker looks now. It's actually looking quite good, and it's quite smooth as well. And that wasn't too much effort to get that going, so sometimes you just have to persevere. There we go, so she's got a little bit of colour in her cheeks now. And maybe just try and even this out a little bit because she's a wee bit uneven there. We can't have that, can we? There we go, that's lovely. I just want to darken down this shadow under her nose a wee bit as well. I want to bring it down to her lip, but I'm being very careful so we don't end up with a mustachio, because that's what we don't want for our girl, because she's very pretty. There we go, that's better. And moving on to her lips now, I'm moving to Red Violet. And what we want to do is we just want to get a little bit of shading in the lips. So along the bottom of the bottom lip, where the lip curves back into the face, that's going to be a little bit darker. So again, just flicky motions, and I'm flicking them up towards her top lip. And the bottom of her top lip, if that makes any sense at all, that's going to be a little bit darker as well. And I'm going to bring some of this round the sides too. Again, we're going for subtlety here. I don't want to make it obvious, but it needs to be seen, and you can see how gentle that is. And again, a lot of this is to do with which colour pencil you pick to go with the marker. So I do suggest that you try these out on a scrap of paper before you go jumping in. That's absolutely perfect. That was just what I was looking for. She's looking a bit more alive now, which is what we need. Now the rest of this, really, you know, that's all the big areas done. This is all about just fiddling about. For her top, I have got Prussian blue, and really what I'm aiming for here is to just get in some shadow. I'm not going to take a huge amount of time over it, but I'm going to start under her frill here. That's going to be really dark. So circular motions, medium pressure. I'm just going to get a line in under where this sort of frilly bit is, if you like. And I want that all the way along down in here. And then I'm just going to kind of blend it out, because I imagine this part of her top looks as if it's quite tight fitting, so I imagine it would be quite smooth. So we just want to blend that out so that it's quite gradual. There we go. And in between here it's going to be darker because there's things in front of it. Speaking of darker, I'm just I'm kind of starting to fight with the light in the cave now, because it's getting to that time of year and the sky has got very black all of a sudden, so I think it's probably going to rain just shortly, and I still have dogs to WALK, so I'm going to get wet. Make that really dark in there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we don't have as much to deal with over here, so we've just got the edge of the frill, which is in there somewhere. So it's there somewhere, I promise. So again, I'm just gonna darken this down. I'm not too precious over it, because we just want this sort of, it's this illusion of what we're doing rather than trying to get it absolutely correct. Because sometimes if you give someone a hint or a suggestion of what you're trying to do, people's brains tend to fill in the blanks for you, which is great for stuff like this, especially when it's not a really realistic picture. Okay, looking at her frill now, we just want to give this a bit of texture, and again there are lines there already from Hannah Lynn to help us. So where our hatched areas are, that's where you want to make it darker. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow some of these creases, and I'm just going to extend those a bit like I did earlier and bring it out a little bit. So really all I'm doing is kind of exaggerating them a little bit more. That's probably the best word. And then flicky motion, good, we all like the flicky motion. And then here's another fold here, so we'll bring this out and round. And we want these lines to be reasonably defined, because we want them to look like folds. So you don't need to be blending these out or anything, they're meant to be there. So flicky flick flick, there we go. And here's another one here. And we'll just keep going with these all the way round. There's another one in there. And this is getting quite dark in here, so we'll just colour that in. Blah, blah, blah. There we go. Super. Quick, simple, and look at that. Excellent. So the other side's... let's just pop some in here where we can see things. And we'll do a couple in here too. Again, not too concerned about this area because most of it's tucked under her hair. And maybe have one or two in here and make this dark in the corner where it disappears in behind her hair. Why not? Okay, that's looking alright. That's looking alright. Alright, for the skull, I haven't picked a pencil for the skull yet, but I've decided I just want to put in a few extra lines, and just off the top of my head, I think I am going to go... I don't know what to do. I think I'll try Bistra. I said I don't even have my swatch book or anything to hand. Yeah, so I'm going to give it a go with Bistra. This might be completely the wrong colour. But again, it's just kind of like we did with the top there. I just want to pop in some shading. It's not going to be immediately obvious, but that's kind of the idea, so... And let's have some in here as well. Just really light hand. How many times have I said that this video? In fact, how many times I've said that in most of my videos actually. Just round the outside here. Okay, the Bistra wasn't a bad choice. I think I could have made a better choice, but it wasn't a bad choice, so that's fine. And just maybe a little bit under here as well. And then where all these flowers are sitting on top of the skull. See, now this is the thing, this is probably one of the least tattooed darlings in this book, and I didn't pick this one on purpose. It just it seemed to be a good one to use for the video because it's one of the less complicated images. So there we are, I'll just put a little bit in round there. Why not? There we go. Alright, so now we want to go on to the fiddly bits, everyone's favourite part. And what I've got here is I'm just going to jump between the green and the red pencil that we've already used. So that was pine green and the red violet. I also have, excuse me, dark red as well. So that's kind of like, I'm just going to jump between the three. And all I'm doing is just accentuating parts in these, I can't speak. All I'm doing is accentuating what's already there, and this is just a case of using your eye and deciding when's a good time to stop. Just making sure we're still in focus. So let's start with the pine green, and just, again, the best thing to do is actually just to follow Hannah's lines, and you can't go wrong. And if you feel you want to add in a little bit more, usually with things like this I will add the darker shade in at the base. It's a good place to do it, especially when you're working in teeny tiny areas. You don't want to spend forever trying to get shadows and highlights and all this kind of jazz. So even if you just pop a few streaks in at the bottom, a few flicks, then that is still going to give you enough contrast between the tips of one part and the base of the next part. And that's kind of a good spot to be in with things like this. And again, you don't have to spend a huge amount of time on this. Because you've done all the legwork with the marker early on, it really is just a case of enhancing what's there. For those of you that are regulars will know that I'm not too precious over stuff like this. I just want to see how the dark red compares on here. Okay, I've pressed quite hard there and it's not really doing much, so I'm just going to junk that and I'm going to go back to my red violet because I know that that's tried and tested. There we go. And again, just putting a little bit more colour in at the base of these petals. I'm just going to run a line round there. I'll make this one darker as well. Get creative with this. There we go, that's good enough for me. So let's move down to the flowers on the skull and down here. Now we can get quite creative here. This flower in particular seems to have a lot of layers to it, so we can really pick and choose where we want these dark areas. And if you're only doing it on a section of each of the petals, it's really going to make the other areas pop out a little bit more, so that's pretty cool. As you can see, I'm not taking a huge amount of care. This is one of these little touches that adds to your colouring, but you know, you're not gonna create any disasters with it. So just popping a wee bit in here and there gives you variation, and it makes the whole picture just a little bit more interesting for your eye to look at. Now this kind of pansy type one, I'm going to make this centre part dark here, and I'm going to leave those outer petals and then just add in a little bit here, and I might make the very centre of that black. There we go. And these ones down here, just a couple of flicky lines will suffice. There we go. I am quite happy with this so far. And I'm just going to go back to my pine green now, and we're going to work away on some of these leaves. Now I'm not going to do anything with the lettering on our tattoo. Where there are these kind of hatched areas, you could darken them down, but that is getting into like super fiddly territory. I might try with some of the bigger letters, but it's not, again, it's something I wouldn't be rushing to do. I think this will all be dark in here because it's kind of in behind. Okay, so my camera cut out there. I don't know how much of that we've missed, but basically I just did the same down here with these green leaves as I did on our little headpiece. So that is the bulk of the work done. I think I'm going to leave the actual ashes as they are because there's quite a lot of pattern in there. There is one last thing I want to do before we finish up, and that is I want to take a white gel pen. Now this is very specific and I'm using this one for a reason, and this isn't actually a gel pen that I would normally favour, but they are quite popular, and it is the Uniball Signo 0.7. And the reason I like this one for this is when you go quickly with this gel pen, it can leave quite sort of scratchy, streaky lines, and weirdly that's what I want. So what I want to do is just head back up to the hair here, and in some of these sections I'm literally going to whisk the pen back and forth quite quickly, and I want points that are going to shine, but I don't want it to be in any way, shape or form uniform. So if I start with this section here, I'm just going to go back and forth, really quick sort of sweeping motions, and you can just see that and no more, and that's the idea. I want it to be nice and subtle. I do not want to take away from what I've already done. So I'm just going back and forth, and I'm letting it be scratchy and all the rest of it. Yep, so literally just 1 or 2 lines within each section. Like this, and it just helps to lift some of the sections of hair a wee bit. It doesn't even have to be on every section if you don't want it to be, and of course you can always skip this out entirely. Moving down here, this little pattern on the cross, I just want to add in some white lines here. And I want to do the same with the ashes down the bottom, because if any of you have ever looked at ash, then I'm sure, not that you would stare at it on a regular basis, but you all know what I'm talking about. It's very flecked and speckled, so I just want to kind of put that idea across. Again, less is more. Now this will show through some of the ink. Eventually the ink kind of collides with the gel pen and it sort of tints the gel pen, which is not going to be a bad thing in this instance, and it's the same with the hair because it's going to be nice and subtle, and it's just going to sink in a little bit and it's going to look pretty good. So we'll just do a wee bit of that here and there. It does look quite stark to begin with, but as I say, it will calm down. Just work my way across here. Again, no rhyme, no reason to this, just kind of doing my thing. Okay, I think that is us. Let's take a zoom out. And there we have it. That is our finished Hannah Lynn tattooed darling using markers, pencil, a little bit of gel pen, and on the dreaded Create Space paper. I'm really happy with the way this has turned out. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, or if you have any particular techniques you like to use on Create Space paper as well. I did want to show you the other image that I'd done in a similar fashion, and it's a couple of pages back. I can take my marker paper out now, so need that. Let me just find out. There she is. There's the other one that I did as well. So I did pick a similar colour scheme but used slightly different shades, and I used exactly the same technique for the hair but just a darker shade of grey underneath. I think I used C5 for the hair, so this colour that we've used down here for the ash I used in our hair, and then used black over the top of it, and it's come out really well as well. So there you go. Grey doesn't have to be boring either. Anyway, I want to thank you all very much for watching and joining me, and hopefully you have learned something or you have taken something away from this video, and that would be the best outcome for me. As I said, I've had great fun doing this. I really enjoy working with markers in the Hannah Lynn pictures. It's just something that kind of tickles my fancy. I would also like to thank the lovely Judy once more for generously sending me this book. It was so nice of you. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure you're as glad as I am to see it actually being used in a video. Anyway, thank you once again very much for watching. Drop a like if you thought this was a good video, and we shall see you back in the cave for another video real soon. Bye for now, everyone.